Hello and welcome to this Exmoor trim fitting video. Today we're going to be showing you how to fit our new defeater barrier mat for the R380 Defender. Part number for this is EXT009-29. So fitting the mat is fairly straightforward. The tools you'll need to do this are a pair of side cutters, a bradawl, 10mm socket with a socket handle, and an extension is useful if you've got one, 13mm spanner, a posi drive screwdriver, a craft knife or Stanley knife with a new sharp blade, and we've got a ratchet gun, socket gun here just for undoing the bolts. If you have one, that's great. If not, you can get away with just using a socket wrench. So the kit comes supplied in the box as shown here. So when you open it up, you'll have another box with all the fittings in, and we'll go through and show you what's in there in a second. And the three sections of the mat. So very carefully lift out the main section, which is tucked in along the sides. If you can grab it hold with both hands. You might find this easier to have two people and just have one person lift from each side. So that's the seat box. Let's carefully lay that one out. The next section is the tunnel mat. And then the final smaller section is for the firewall. So in the fitting kit box, you'll have a gaiter set, and this is to replace the rubber gaiters that are already on your vehicle. These are optional. You can continue to use the rubber ones if you want, but we've included these black vinyl. So this is for the handbrake, for the gear gaiter and high-low shifters, and this one's for the handbrake sleeve. And there's 3 cable ties that go with those. We've also included a new set of seat bolts, just to replace the old ones, as sometimes they can get a bit rusty. So nice to have a new set of bolts. And then we've also got these spacer washers, which we use for putting underneath the seat runners, just to lift them up to help compensate for the thickness of the mat. During the fitting, we're going to be unbolting the handbrakes. So as a point of safety, if you can do this on level ground, that would be a lot easier. And we also recommend just putting some chocks under your wheels, just in case the handbrake does slip while you're working. At least the vehicle won't roll and cause any damage. So the first step in fitting the mat is to strip out the front of your vehicle. We've already made a start on this, and we have got separate fitting videos showing how to remove and fit various parts, but we'll just quickly go through how to remove your front seats. It's a fairly straightforward job. They're just held in with 4 bolts. Start by sliding your seat forward as far as you can. And you can just reach behind and undo the bolts. Slide the seat back on its runners, and you can undo the 2 front bolts. And then just carefully lift out your seat. You might find it easier to tip the seat back for doing that. You need to get the vehicle to a stage where obviously the seats are removed, any center console or center seat is removed, and then you need to strip out any flooring material such as carpets or old matting systems that you've got installed. If you've got Dynamat or any other sound deadening material fitted, that can stay. Up to about 3mm of Dynamat works perfectly well with the matting. So you can leave all that on either the tunnel, the floor, or the seat box. So the next thing you'll need to do is to remove the gear knob. Now, whether these are aftermarket ones like these or the genuine ones, they just screw on in place. And the same with the high-low shifter. Now, if you're going to use your original gaiter sets, you can leave those in place. But if you want to fit the new vinyl ones, it's best to pull these off now. So they just unclip around the bottom there. You see the little lip. Just slide that off over the gear stick. And to remove the handbrake gaiter, you'll see there's a little Christmas tree stud on the side there. Just pop that out, and then you can just slide the gaiter up over the handbrake. Next, we'll remove the fuse box cover. These are usually held in with 2 little thumb screws. Just pop that out of the way. Next, we're going to remove the panel that holds the fuses. This is held in with a screw on either side. Now, yours may be a 10mm hex bolt, or it could be a posi drive screw, depending on the age of the vehicle. So just undo them on either side. And we're taking this off to allow the firewall section just to tuck in behind that, and the fuse board helps clamp it into position. You don't actually need to remove the fuse board, it just stays where it is, but now we've got access to tuck the mat in behind it. Next, we'll unbolt the handbrake. That's held in place with 2 13mm bolts. The handbrake will just pop out. You don't need to disconnect the cable, you can just leave it hanging loose. And the last bit we're going to do is to remove the bonnet release catch. You find just tucked up on the bulkhead here underneath the dashboard, and that's held in place with 2 M10 nuts. Again, useful if you've got a socket extension, how to get into those. That out of the way. But the first part of the mat that we're going to fit is the small section that goes around the bulkhead. The only section on the matting that isn't actually marked already for the holes is for the bonnet release catch, and the reason is, depending on the age of the vehicle, these can vary in position slightly, so we need to mark those on the mat and make a couple of holes. So to do that, we just pop the mat into position. And you'll see the cutouts line up with the nuts in the firewall, and you'll get the crease line to sit on the fold of the bulkhead. Now, what you can do is, where the studs push against the mat, if you press hard against it, it will make a little white mark on the mat, and then we just recommend with a bradawl or sharp point you can mark the center of each hole. Pop the mat out. So with the 2 holes marked, you can take the mat out of the vehicle, and then using some kind of boards to protect your worktop, and minding careful of your fingers, just push your bradawl through the mat to make a hole. So with the holes in the firewall section drilled, we can now pop that back into position. Push the mat over the studs, and then hold the mat in place by refixing the bonnet release catch. So with the bonnet release catch bolted in place, we'll then position the mat over the tunnel, carefully lifting the fuse board out of the way, and just tuck it in behind it, and you'll see there's cutouts here and around each of the bolts in the bulkhead, so the mat should line up with all those and leave the holes clear so you can remount the fuse board, and that'll clamp everything into place. So again, using your 10mm socket or your posi drive screwdriver, you can tighten up the fuse board again. That's that section fitted. The next thing we'll do is to fit the seat box cover. Now most of the cutouts are already in place for this, so the seat box flaps are mostly trimmed out. There's just a couple of little tags in place just to hold everything during transit. So with a sharp Stanley knife you can just carefully cut along the joins. So there'll probably be one here and one on either side. Now make sure you've got a nice fresh blade in your Stanley knife. The rubber cuts very easily. And just make a nice clean cut on the tags. And it's the same on the front. Okay, so that's your seat battery box and ECU box covers. So you got one on either side to do the same one. Now, a lot of the seat cutouts for the seat mount bolts are already pre-trimmed. The only ones that we don't trim out are for the handbrake and for either your center seat or cubby box, depending on which configuration you've got, or whether you have a left-hand or right-hand drive vehicle. So if we flip the mat over, you'll see all the holes are marked on the underside. So for your left-hand drive vehicle, you can trim out these holes here, and that will be for the bolts and the center point where the handbrake goes through. And then we've got cutouts for the center seat and for the cubby box in the middle. Again, trimming those out just with your sharp Stanley knife. Carefully go around each of the holes, pop the little sections out. If you have a 110 rather than the 90 that we're fitting on here, you'll see there's an extra flap to remove here for the seat belt lower mounting, and it is actually marked on there to tell you which parts you need to remove depending on your vehicle type. So we've trimmed out the holes here on the right hand side for the handbrake, and if you're going to leave the handbrake in place without disconnecting all the cable, if you put a slot through here from the larger hole through to the cutout for the tunnel, and then you can also make a little slot here that will allow you to put the sensor cable in position. If you prefer not to do this, then you need to completely remove the handbrake, which is a little bit more involved, but this way works just fine. So fitting the seat box is fairly straightforward, but is easier if you've got two people. So start by just rolling it up and laying it on top of the seat box and folding the sides out just to get it roughly in position. We get it snugged up against the little lip on the back of the bulkhead. And then you just want to tuck the handbrake to one side and fold the mat underneath. And you'll see now those two little slots we made allow you to wrap the mat around the cable and the sensor wire without actually having to remove the whole assembly. Okay. But we're not actually going to bolt the handbrake in just yet, as having it loose makes fitting the tunnel and floor section much easier. Now we've got the seat box fitted, before we put the tunnel and floor mat section in, we'll fit the new gaiter set. So when you receive your gaiter in the fitting kit, it'll probably look a little bit like this. And what you want to do is turn it inside out. So it looks like this. Next, you start by sliding the gear stick over to the top. And you just want to secure that in place with one of the cable ties from the fitting kit. Just below the threaded section. So pull that up nice and tight, and then cut the excess of the cable tie off with your side cutters. So once you've got the cable tie secured, put your hand inside and grab the outer edge and just start to turn it back the right way around. You can then pull the gaiter down over the gear stick shaft, turn the whole thing the right way around again. Just carefully work it down. Be careful not to pull too hard. Once you've got it roughly in position, you repeat the same process with the high-low sleeve. So just tuck the end over the end of the shaft, pop the zip tie around and secure it just below the threaded section. Cut the excess off with your side cutters. And just carefully turn the gaiter the right way around, ease it down over the gear stick, and then pull the elasticated base around the surround on the gearbox tunnel. Make sure you get it snug down as tightly as you can. So before you lift the mat into position, just push your gear shifter into sort of third or first gear, just to make this a bit easier. Then you want to lift the mat so that the hole goes over the gear stick. Now tilt the mat forward and tuck down and underneath the fuse board. Just being careful you don't catch any of the fuses when you're doing this. Just gently ease the mat down into place, into the footwells. Now you can pull the handbrakes to one side, which will allow you to get the mat in behind it. And you can work it around the gear stick, down around the tunnel section, just to make sure it's all snugly fitted into place. So once the tunnel mat's in place, you can put the handbrake back into its hole, so you force the little gaiter back into the seat box. That can be a bit of a tight fit, but if you give it a shove it'll go. And then it's a case of just popping in the 2 bolts. So once the handbrake's bolted back into place, we can now fit the gaiter. So as with the handbrake, when you receive it, it'll look like this. So before we start, we just want to turn it inside out, like so. Exactly the same as we did with the handbrake. You start by pulling it over the front end once inside out. And pull it past the plastic part of the handbrake, and then secure it just below the plastic handle with a cable tie. And then just snip off the excess. And you can pull the cover down the right way. Just work it into place. And using your rattle, you just want to mark the little plastic hole in the side. Make a little hole through the gaiter where you can push the Christmas tree stud back in to hold the gaiter into position. I've just made the hole. Just push the stud in. That's the handbrake and gear gaiter fitted. Just check the handbrake's working securely. Next we can refit the gear knobs and the fuse board cover. So the gear knobs simply just screw back on. Pop your fuse board cover back into place and scrub with the little thumb wheels. Go, and that completes the installation of the defeater barrier mat. So all we have to do now is pop back your seats, either your centre seat and your cubby box. Now you remember in the fitting kit we had some little washers that we said were to go under the seats, and we'll just show you why you need those now. So the washers in the kit are to go underneath the seat runners, and for each seat you'll want 8 washers, 2 under each hole. So what we do is just take 2 of each washer, pop them over the holes for the seats. And when you lift your seat back in, you want to sit it on top of those washers. And using your new bolts, drop down through the seat, through the washers, and then you can bolt them down into the captive nuts that are already in the seat box. So I recommend just put each bolt in loosely to start with. Once you've got the 2 front bolts in, just gently slide the seat forward so you get access to the 2 back bolts. And same again at the back, just drop your new bolt down through the seat, through the 2 washers, and screw into the captive nut in the seat box. Once you've got all 4 loosely tight, put them to position, you can then tighten them up. And the washers are just there to give a little bit of space underneath the seat runners so that the seat can move forward and backwards freely without binding on the new mat. So repeat the same process on the driver's seat. You can bolt in either your cubby box or your centre seat, and that's your job done.